Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now joined by the Magic Man himself, Bill O'Donnell from Ontario, Canada. The first man to win $10 million in a season, Bill, correct?
It is, yeah. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and thanks for agreeing to support this Irish-American weekend. Was that $10 million American or Canadian?
At that time, it was American.
Right. And at that time, you were based where, in the Meadowlands?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, when January through August was the Meadowlands, and then you traveled after that.
Okay. And did you go out on the Grand Circuit?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, all the Irish fans will be familiar with the Magic Man, Bill O'Donnell. Bill, the horses which spring to mind when your name is mentioned is, of course, the famous Annihilator with his ground-devouring stride, and of course Prakas and Barbary Spur. Those type of horses, yes?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, who would you say was the fastest pacer you ever drove?
Cam Best.
Best. Yeah. What was his lifetime mark, Bill?
146 and 1/5.
And was that in a
time trial?
Time trial,
but
yeah.
It was in a time trial, yeah. He was the fastest horse I ever sat behind for sure. For a short piece, I'm sure.
And was he a tough racehorse?
Annihilator was. Pardon?
Was Cam Best a tough racehorse?
Oh yeah, good horse. Yeah, he made it. 1,600,000 or 7, and good horse and a great sire. Very good sire.
Right. Okay. What sort of stallions has Cam Best given the breed? What sons or daughters?
Some of the better horses that he had. Oh, geez, I can't even name them now, but he was around for a long time, and a lot of good race horses. Not so maybe so much of the Grand Circuit horses, but really good race horses that people they really liked, and they were affordable.
Raceway horses.
Yeah.
Yeah, Raceway. Well, tell me, the people at Portmarnock will be anxious to hear a bit about Annihilator. What can you remember? I know Billy Houghton trained Annihilator. Do you happen to remember what length of a hobble he went in?
Yeah, I do. He is 62 inches, I think, as a 2-year-old, and then as a 3-year-old, when they came back, he had 64. But I think they took them up a wee little bit.
Yeah.
But he was very, very natural. He didn't interfere. He didn't wear any knee boots. He was just a nice big horse. He was the best horse I ever drove by far as racehorse.
That's some stride, isn't it? A 62-inch hobble, 64-inch hobble. You don't see that every day of the week.
You do now. You didn't then, but now a lot of horses wear big long hobbles. The breed it's so much different than it was even 30 years ago when he was around, or 35. There's so many of them now. They wear 60, 62, 64, 66-inch hobbles. They're bigger, they're better. They bigger strides, fewer steps to go a mile, and the speed has just been unreal. How many of them? The first horse that ever went under 150 was Annihilator, 36 years ago. Now that's commonplace now, right?
Yeah.
Here at the Meadowlands.
And you notice nowadays a lot of horses go without an overcheck or with a very loose overcheck, isn't that right?
You see more of that all the time. Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that you see is a lot less equipment, and they can just go. A lot of the equipment was to hold them too back in the day when they couldn't go as fast for a long, long period of time. You had to conserve their speed till the last quarter if you could. But now they can just seem to go for the whole mile. It's like a mile sprint now.
The breed is getting more refined.
Much more so. But they're, they used to call them jugheads. Now they're more thoroughbredy looking. They have nice heads on them and tall, long bodies. Big difference in them.
A finer breed. Well, tell us a little bit about your early career. You're from Nova Scotia?
I'm from a little town called Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, mining town. Yeah. And
there's a song about that, isn't there?
Pardon?
There's a song about Spring Hill, Nova Scotia.
Yeah, there is. Well, they had a big mine explosion in a bump. They called the other one. There was over 100 men killed there in two years. My dad was transferred to Sydney Mines in Nova Scotia on Cape Breton Island. He was in the coal mine. Actually, he worked in the first one that exploded. He wasn't in it. He was supposed to work overtime, and he had a bad toothache, and he booked off and went to the dentist to save his life. He saved that tooth. I think he had it till he died. And so then we moved down to Cape Breton, and my dad, he trained and drove horses. My uncle did, and my grandfather, he worked for the Cumberland Coal Company in Spring Hill, and he took care of the horses that they used in the coal mine, the big horses, like work horses, not ponies in those days. So that was my first affiliation with horses, and with my dad, helping him whether I wanted to or not. Some days you just were told to do it. He worked at night in the coal mine and trained the horses in the morning. And when I got off school, I would finish the horses up and feed them and stuff. And then when I got older, I went to Sackville Downs with my uncle, Art Porter, and would work for him for the summertime. And then when I got out of school, I went to Ontario. I worked for Ronnie Fagan one summer, went back home to Nova Scotia, finished school. Then I came back to Ontario, worked for Bill Wellwood, then went back home again, then worked for the Webbies for 3 years, and then went to the United States. I had a job offer Jim Doherty gave me, so I had a pretty good foundation by then with my dad, my uncle, Jim Doherty, Ronnie Fagan, and Bill Wellwood. So I worked for Jim a while, and I landed a job with a woman from her and her husband from New Hampshire in training their horses. And I worked for them for 5 or 6 years, but I drove on the side and then moved to Saratoga, stayed there a couple of years and ventured down to the Meadowlands and got lucky.
Got lucky. Well,
I hit the jackpot.
what was it Gary Player said? The harder I practice, the luckier I get.
Yeah, the guys that work the hardest have the most luck. Yeah, exactly.
Gary Player, I think, coined that phrase. Well, now there was big talk in the industry. Billy Houghton, the famous Houghton Green Wave, he was one of the best known, if not the best known, harness drivers in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
At that time, he was probably in his early 60s. He got off Annihilator to let you take the drive on Annihilator.
Yeah, you did.
And it was big talk at the time. How can somebody as good as Billy Houghton put a catch driver up? And there was a lot of talk whenever you, Hervey Filion, John Campbell, some of that generation started to drive. You kind of dislodged or displaced the old guard, like Stanley Dancer, Billy Houghton, people like that. And just tell us a bit about the early days of your career as a catch driver and what makes a good catch driver.
Well, I always drove, I trained my own stable. I had a pretty good sized stable, and I used to drive for other people. And then I got more and more drives and it was busier. Like, you could drive 8 or 10, 12 horses a night. And if they wanted to put me down, I was more than glad to do it. Right. So I just wanted to know what time to be there at night. I'd stay all night. So what makes a good catch driver? I think a foundation, first of all, being a horse person per se, and just kind of understanding a horse. I think more than anything, what his capabilities are, and try to get the best out of him, and basically get him to the head of the stretch without being too tired, and knowing the other drivers, knowing the other horses, being familiar with the racetrack. There's so many things: wind, rain, you name it. It all kind of goes together, right?
That sums it up pretty well, Bill. In Ireland, our industry is not as developed as yours, and a lot of the leading trainers still drive their own. Okay?
Yeah.
But just for the people who are listening, what sort of things does a catch driver look for in those 4 or 5 minutes before they turn and face the gate?
Well, the first thing you ask the trainer, I always did, is does he have any quirks? Is he okay at the gate? That was the main thing. If you don't get away from the gate, you don't have much of a chance, right? So when you're scoring down, you got the 4, 5, 6 minutes on the track, you're looking at the other horses and make sure, you notice anything unsoundness or, whatever the case may be, how nervous the other guys might be. Sometimes you get, some guys are a little nervous, and just play it by ear, and you have a plan, going behind the gate, but you got to be able to change, right? You can't just stick to plan A. So you got to be pretty versatile what to do, and hope things work out for the best for you.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit then, Bill, about the other great horses you drove. Tell us a bit about winning the jug. Was your first jug Barbary Spur? Or no, he was your second jug, was he?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. No, Annihilator was my first jug that I won. I'd raced in it 3-4 times before that and finished second a couple times, but nobody remembers who was second, right? And Annihilator, they weren't going to go to the jug with Annihilator. He never raced on a half-mile track, and only once before that in Monticello. And he wasn't really that great, but Delaware racetrack is kind of a circle. It's almost like a saucer. It's turns are bigger for, as most half-mile tracks. So they decided to go on a Friday. He raced Friday night at Garden State, and they decided after that. So he only had 6 days.
Right.
So they shipped him out there on the weekend, and Billy went out and trained him on Monday or Tuesday. He just went a quarter of a mile with him. He just went around the first turn with him and said, yeah, he's good to go. So
yeah,
that's how they end up going with him. So I remember when I got to Delaware that day, I said, how do you get around the turns? And he says, you get around the first one. Okay. It's up to you to get him around the other 3. So that was about it. So anyway,
no pressure.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But he drew good. He drew the inside both heats, and the first heat was pretty easy on him, and the next heat he was pressured the whole way, and he just hung on one by a head, but he was very good.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell us a bit about Barbary Spur. I think he was trained by Dick Stillings, was he?
He was. Dick Stillings trained him, and his brother Buddy, and was owned by Roy Davis. Great people to work for, and he was really a big horse, a giant horse, and he wore, I think, a 66-inch hobble. I think they said at one time they had on a big guy, but very, very handy for a big horse. Had great speed, and he was the same way. We were canceled. The jug got postponed it's always on a Thursday, and it rained, so we got rained out. So they're going to try to go Friday. So I stayed over, and Friday morning I wake up and I open the curtain at the motel. It's raining, so I packed my bag and I'm getting ready to go. I'm getting ready to go home. I said, "There's going to be no jug this year because they could only cancel, I guess, the one day or reschedule." So then somebody in the lobby at the hotel said, "No, they're going to try to go. The rain's supposed to let up," and it did, and it was great. I mean, the track was great. He set a world's record that day, and he went 2 great races also.
Interesting. Then another horse you were associated with had a knock-on effect over in Britain, beside us here in Ireland. This trotter, Prakash.
Yeah, I did.
Prakash. They set up a fund in Britain. I'm not sure if it's still going, but they set up a fund to promote the breeding of young British bred trotters called the Prakash Fund. The man who owned them, I think it was a Dr. Mackenzie.
Yeah.
He bequeathed them a lot of money to promote trotters in Britain as opposed to pacers. But tell us a bit about Prakash, please.
Well, he was the best of his year too. He was just a great gaited horse and easy to drive, and had no issues with him. Once the gate get out of his way, he was very, very, very good horse. And unfortunately, he wasn't a very good sire, but that you don't know until you start breeding him and his coals start hitting the ground, right? But he was a very good horse to drive. Sometimes
happens the great race horses or great race mares don't necessarily make great brood mares or great stallions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's no science to it.
Yeah, yeah, and you can have a mediocre race horse who makes a great stallion.
Absolutely.
It's funny.
Yeah. There's no explanation for it, right? There is, but we don't know it.
Okay, well, you're unique, Bill. Recently, we've been blessed in Ireland to have Aaron Merriman, Jordan Stratton, Dexter Dunn, guys like that who've come over, George Brennan, Mike Wilder, people like that have been good enough to come and race at our little track here in Dublin. But you were years ahead of them, because I think maybe Mr. Liam Wallace was running Anachmore Raceway at that time, and you come over and drove here 15 or 16 years ago. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, I did. I hadn't planned on driving. They just wanted us to go there. So they said, well, bring your colors and, you could sign some autographs and stuff. So when I got there, we went up to Anamort that day to Belfast, and there was a younger guy there. He had a horse in the first race that had been over in Canada working for Joe Stutzman. So he just came up and said, you want to drive my horse? He said, he's perfectly safe and stuff, and he's got a chance. So I did. I drove him, and he won, and I won a few others that day. But I drove, I think, pretty much the whole card, I think. But it was a fun day.
Unfortunately, I wasn't present that day. I went down Donaghmore a lot. I just wasn't there that day. Nothing personal. But
Right.
no, people remember it fondly. I think, Bill, you're being modest. I think you drove 4 or 5 winners that day.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, 4. Yeah.
Listen, Bill, you're not doing too bad if you can't remember having a 4-timer.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, a bit like your great nemesis, John Campbell.
Right.
Like yourself, he's retired now 4 or 5 years, and he's involved in admin with the Hambletonian Society. Tell us a bit about your work with the Central Ontario Standardbred Association, please, Bill.
Well, the Central Ontario Standardbred Association, it's a horsemen's association. We represent the horse people that race in Ontario, and we supply benefits, medical benefits, benevolence funds, sign contract, racing contracts with the racetracks, which, we got lots of them here in the province. And we're stationed right at Mohawk. We have an office right there in a new paddock. They built a new paddock there for us last year. Actually, we just got moved in probably 2-3 weeks before this pandemic hit, and we've been working from home ever since. Although I was down there this morning, it looks like we're going to be opened up hopefully here soon. Right. There was a bunch of qualifying. There was 15 qualifying races yesterday, and 14 or 15 today, and the same tomorrow. So.
Well, this is probably a difficult question to give a short answer, but how would you sum up the state of harness racing in Ontario or Canada at the moment?
Well, I guess it's kind of not as good as it was, and hopefully it'll be better. When we lost the slot money, our percentage of the slot money, and we rely solely on government money now, and you have to budget it out for race dates and purse money. And we've lost about 30% of our purse money and lots of race dates, lots of horses. But what's here now? I mean, they're surviving. And if you have a horse good enough for a place like Mohawk, which is the premier place here in Ontario or Canada even, people are doing okay, but not as good as they were, put it that way. And hopefully we can grow our handle, which this past year was up quite a lot, which is
well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
And can you tell me anything else positive about the industry in Canada? I'm always looking on the bright side. What's positive? What green shoots can you see in Canada or even down in the US?
Could you repeat that, please? I have a little time.
Where's the growth going to come from in the next 4 or 5 years? Where's the growth? Where are the green shoots in harness racing?
Well, it's got to come from the younger people, right? I mean, the participants, not so much, but our fans and our bettors are getting older. And we have lots of ways now through TV. Most all our handle is from, it's internet stuff and, online, or we have what they call HBI here. And they'll bring in 40 races on a weekend, right? And send our signal around. So, and we've got, all the tracks have HD cameras now, stuff that people like to watch and gives a better view. And a lot more people taking and the product is good. And that's the main thing. It's got to be good racing, right? They like big fields and good racing. And that's where we got to go from here. But if last year was an indication, we're on the right track.
Good. Well done. But there's a lot of talk over in Ireland that this association, the Irish Harness Racing Association, are trying to set up their own wagering pools that will give a cut back to the prize money. Totalisator or pari mutual. I suppose you'd be in favor of that.
Oh yeah. I don't know how the booking system works. As a bookie, do they pay? I don't know. I don't know how it works.
I can tell you a bit about it. As you know, I'm a bookie myself. Bookies pay a daily pitch fee,
Right.
which goes towards the track. But
Right.
in the overall scheme of things, Bill, it's not huge. And in some types of racing, the bookies pay a levy or a tax, which goes towards the prize money.
Right.
But I think, probably looking at it objectively, a tote system would probably be better for racing than a pure bookie system, to be honest.
Oh, for sure. It's, you have a set amount you're getting of every dollar that's bet, right? So, and then that goes towards purses and operating costs. And today with, when I was in Ireland, I was impressed with just how it was set up as far as just a nice little restaurant. People could have a beer or a sandwich or whatever and could sit out and stand out in the tarmac. It happened to be a beautiful day that day with no rain. They said it was unusual, but it was, it happened to be a good day. And I was really impressed that the expense or lack of expense to run that racetrack would have been great. Like our places here, we got grandstands that hold 15,000 people, and we have a lot of cold weather and a lot of hot weather. So to heat and to cool those buildings is a fortune, number one, just electricity and stuff in those places. So there's, if we had places like they do in Australia where they race out just a racetrack in a field pretty much, right? So that could all contribute to that. But the pari-mutuel, that's the key for sure.
For push racing, yeah. Well, as I say, well, this is a pipe dream of our association to try. Our association's trying to get its own tote. And I know Bill Donovan, who is one of our principal benefactors, he's very much in favour of that system.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Let's hope it comes. I suppose, as a bookie, I hope the bookies can coexist with it. I hope it doesn't close the bookies entirely. But as a horseman, I think an IHRA sponsored or involved tote would probably be good for the game.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
So we're almost done, Bill. We're almost out of time. But tell us some of the people you know in the Irish scene. I believe you know Alan Richardson.
I do. I trained a horse for Alan, and Alan come over here for a year or so. He met his wife here and married her here and took her back to Ireland. And I had a horse for them, like I said. And then the Wallaces, I knew the Wallaces through Jimmy Whalen, and we went over there to Ireland for that trip. And there was quite a few of them that I knew. The Dunns, the Flanagans.
Christy Dunn and his sons Jeff and Jonathan.
Yeah.
The Flanagans. Mark is our chairman, as you know.
Yeah. So, over here, Anthony Hahn, he's from Dublin. He's over here in Canada. I got to know him when I first moved here to Ontario. I was in the same barn with him. He was working for Stu for a lot at the time.
Yeah.
And I used to meet a lot of guys that would come from England, Ireland to the jug every year. There would be a lot of them would come over.
Yeah. No, we intend to interview Anthony for this project.
Right.
We're very proud in Ireland of Anthony's success up in Canada, and of course Robbie Cleary's success down in, I think he's in New York or New Jersey.
Who's that?
Robert Cleary, a young guy called Robert Cleary.
Yeah.
He trained Rebel Rouser. Right. It's called Rebel Rouser, and I think he may have trained Reclamation. No, I think Reclamation was with Burke, but Robbie Cleary has had some good success since going to America.
Right. Good.
So I've asked all the well-known and successful horsemen I've spoken to, Bill, could you give us 2 or 3 sentences of a tip or advice to a young guy starting out as a caretaker, wants to be a driver? You've already referred to it earlier in the interview, but just tell us some tips for a guy starting out in harness racing.
Well, my uncle used to tell me, keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth shut. That's the first thing. Work hard and find, when you start, if you get to the point where you start driving, just pick one guy to mentor, no matter who it may be. He may not be the leading driver at the track, but just pick one guy and kind of model yourself after him. And I was very lucky to be around the people I was around. And like with my uncle, I mean, I learned more with him than anyone. He was a very, very good horseman. He was a homebody. He liked the Maritimes, and he always said, like when people would say, he said, I taught him everything he knew, but I didn't teach him everything I knew. So that's about the size of it. So keep, work hard, keep, stay true to yourself. And it's the passion. If you can't teach that, it's either in you or it isn't, I think, right? So it's the passion, but your heart will tell you which way to go.
The one common denominator, the one common theme amongst all you great trainers and drivers I've spoken to is everyone has said you have to have a feel for the horse.
Oh, absolutely. You got to think, like my uncle used to say, think like a horse.
Like that.
And that's about the size of it, right?
So Bill O'Donnell, the magic man, first man to win $10 million in a year. You've been most helpful to Irish harness racing, and thanks for getting involved in our project.
Oh, thank you very much, Dan, and good luck.
Thank you, Bill.